Commander Vex-Nine had seen many species in his 40 cycles of service across the Galactic Defense Coalition. He'd witnessed the graceful Etherians float through combat simulations like liquid starlight. He'd watched the massive Stoneheart warriors crush training dummies with their bare fists. He'd even observed the cunning shade crawlers slip through laser grids without triggering a single alarm. But humans? Humans were supposedly the weakest addition to the Coalition. Soft, pink, fragile little creatures from some backwater planet called Earth. The recruitment files had been laughably sparse on details, mentioning only their adaptability and problem-solving skills, whatever that meant. Another batch of meat for the grinder, Vex-Nine muttered to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Crawl-7, as they watched the new human recruits file into Training Bay 12. The facility stretched before them like a mechanical cathedral, filled with obstacle courses, combat simulators, and enough weaponry to level a small moon. Crawl-7's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Look at them, sir. They're so squishy. I've seen more intimidating food rations." The 30 human recruits stood in formation, their eyes wide as they took in their surroundings. Most barely reached Vex-Nine's shoulder, and that was saying something considering he was considered short by Krallick's standards. Their pale skin looked like it would tear at the slightest touch, and their tiny limbs appeared incapable of wielding anything heavier than a datapad. "Welcome to hell, meat sacks." Vex-Nine's voice boomed across the training bay, his translator perfectly conveying his disdain in their primitive language. "I am Commander Vex-Nine, and for the next 6 months I own your pathetic little lives." He began pacing in front of them, his forearms clasped behind his back, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a sneer among his kind. "You've been assigned to my training facility because someone, somewhere, thought you might be useful to the Coalition. I, however, remain unconvinced." A few of the humans exchanged glances. One particularly small female with short auburn hair caught his attention. She stood perfectly still, but there was something in her green eyes that made Vex-Nine pause. Not fear, which he expected. Not confusion, which would have been understandable. No, there was something else entirely. Something that made his combat instincts tingle with warning. "You, small one." He pointed at her with one of his clawed fingers. "State your designation." "Cadet Maya Torres, sir," she replied, her voice clear and steady. "Torres," he repeated, letting the alien syllables roll off his forked tongue with obvious distaste. "Tell me, Torres, what makes you think you belong here?" Maya's expression didn't change. "I'm here to serve the Coalition, sir." Vex-Nine's laugh sounded like grinding metal. "Serve? You look like you'd have trouble serving yourself lunch, let alone the greatest military alliance in known space." Several of the other instructors chuckled at his joke. The Krallick's sense of humor was notoriously cruel, and they enjoyed watching the commander break down new recruits. It was practically a sport. "Let me explain something to all of you," Vex-Nine continued, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "The Coalition doesn't need weaklings. We don't need creatures who break at the first sign of pressure. We need warriors, fighters, beings who can stare death in the face and laugh." He stopped directly in front of Maya, looming over her small frame. And frankly, I don't see any of that here. The training began immediately. Vex-Nine had designed a special program just for the humans, one that he was certain would wash out at least half of them by the end of the first week. Physical conditioning that would push their fragile bodies to the breaking point. Combat simulations designed for species 3 times their size and strength. Tactical exercises that assumed knowledge they couldn't possibly possess. But something strange happened. The humans didn't break. Oh, they struggled. They sweated and cursed and occasionally collapsed from exhaustion. But they got back up. Every single time, they got back up. Maya Torres, in particular, was becoming a source of growing irritation for Vex-Nine. No matter what he threw at her, she adapted. When the obstacle course proved too challenging for her shorter legs, she found creative ways around the barriers. When the combat simulator's difficulty settings overwhelmed her reflexes, She learned to predict attack patterns and compensate accordingly. "Sir," Crawl 7 approached him during the second week of training, "the humans are performing adequately." Vex-Nine's eyes narrowed as he watched Maya help another struggling recruit through a particularly challenging climbing exercise. "Adequately isn't good enough, Lieutenant. I want them broken. I want them to realize they don't belong here and crawl back to their little mudball of a planet. Perhaps we should increase the difficulty parameters." "Already tried that. They just adapt." The word tasted bitter in Vex-Nine's mouth. It's like they're too stupid to know when they're beaten. By the third week, Vex-Nine was actively targeting Maya. He singled her out for extra duties, criticized her performance even when it was flawless, and pushed her harder than any other recruit. His reasoning was simple: break the strongest one, and the rest would follow. Maya never complained, never showed anger, never gave him the satisfaction of seeing her crack. "Torres!" he barked during morning inspection, storming over to where she stood at attention. "Your uniform is a disgrace." Maya's uniform was, in fact, perfectly pressed and regulation compliant. Every other instructor in the bay knew it. Even Crawl 7 looked uncomfortable with the obvious targeting. "Sir, yes sir." "I'll correct it immediately." "Sir, you'll correct it by running 20 additional kilometers after today's training session." "Sir, yes sir." Vex-Nine leaned closer, his breath hot against her face. "Tell me, Torres, do you enjoy being humiliated in front of your fellow recruits?" For just a moment, something flickered behind Maya's eyes. Something dangerous, but it was gone so quickly that Vex-Nine almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. "I'm here to learn, sir, whatever it takes." The breaking point came during the fourth week of training. The recruits were practicing hand-to-hand combat, and Vex-Nine had paired them against training golems designed to mimic various alien physiologies. Maya was struggling against a golem programmed with Krallick's fighting patterns, its forearms moving in complex combinations that her human reflexes couldn't match. "Pathetic!" Vex-Nine shouted as Maya was thrown to the mat for the fifth time. "A Krallick's youngling could defeat you with 3 arms tied behind their back." Maya pushed herself to her feet, wiping blood from her split lip. "Permission to continue, sir." "Permission denied. You're embarrassing yourself and wasting everyone's time." "Sir, I'd like to try again." Vex-Nine's temper, already strained from weeks of watching the humans refuse to quit, finally snapped. "You'd like to try again?" "You'd like to try again?" His voice rose to a roar that echoed throughout the training bay. "What you'd like is irrelevant. You're weak. You're useless. You're nothing but a soft little creature who has no business pretending to be a warrior." He stepped closer, his forearms spreading wide in a display of dominance. "You want to know what I think of you and your entire species? You're cosmic accidents. Evolutionary mistakes that somehow managed to crawl out of the primordial soup long enough to embarrass yourselves on a galactic stage." The training bay had gone silent. Every recruit, every instructor, every maintenance worker had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation. Maya stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her expression unreadable. "You're so eager to continue." Vex-Nine's voice dripped with venom. "Fine, let's see how you handle a real opponent instead of a training dummy." He gestured for the golem to power down and stepped into the combat circle himself. At over 7 feet tall and possessing 4 arms capable of crushing steel, he was an intimidating opponent, even for trained coalition warriors. "Commander," Crawl 7 called out nervously, "regulations state that instructors should not engage in direct combat with recruits during training exercises." "I'm making an exception," Vex-Nine replied, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "This little human wants to play soldier. Let's see if she can handle what real combat looks like." Maya didn't move from her ready position. "Sir, I don't think this is wise." Vex-Nine's laugh was harsh and grating. "You don't think it's wise? That's rich. Coming from someone who doesn't even know when she's outclassed." He began circling her slowly, like a predator stalking wounded prey. "Let me educate you about the reality of your situation, Torres. You're a mistake. Your species is a mistake. And I'm going to prove it right here, right now, in front of everyone. The first strike came without warning. Vex-Nine's primary right arm swept toward Maya's head in a blow that would have sent most beings flying across the room. But Maya wasn't there anymore. She had somehow slipped under the attack and moved to his left side. "Stand still!" Vex-Nine snarled, launching a combination attack with all four arms. Maya flowed around his strikes like water, never quite where he expected her to be. Her movements were economical, efficient, almost graceful in their simplicity. She wasn't trying to match his strength or speed. She was using his own momentum against him. "Fight back!" Vex-Nine's frustration was growing with each missed attack. "Stop running and fight!" "I don't want to fight you, sir," Maya replied calmly, ducking under another wild swing. That response infuriated Vex-Nine more than any insult could have. The casual dismissal, the apparent lack of fear, the way she made his attacks look clumsy and predictable, it was humiliating. "You don't want to fight me?" he roared, abandoning technique in favor of raw aggression. "You don't get a choice!" He lunged forward with all four arms extended, intending to grab her and end this embarrassing display. Maya sidestepped at the last moment, and Vex-Nine's own momentum carried him stumbling past her. As he tried to regain his balance, Maya did something that no one in the training bay expected. She spoke, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Sir, with respect, you're making a mistake." Vex-Nine spun around, his face contorted with rage. "A mistake? The only mistake here is thinking your species deserves to breathe the same air as real warriors." And then he did something that would haunt him for the rest of his considerably shortened life. Something that crossed a line that should never be crossed. Something that unleashed forces he had no comprehension of. Commander Vex-Nine drew back his primary right arm and swung it in a vicious backhand aimed directly at Maya's face. Not a training strike, not a demonstration, a full power blow intended to cause serious harm to a being under his command. The slap never landed. Maya's hand shot up and caught his wrist mid-swing, her fingers wrapping around the thick, scaled appendage with surprising gentleness. For a moment, the entire training bay held its breath. "Sir," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying a note that made every survival instinct in the room scream danger. "You really shouldn't have done that." Vex-Nine tried to pull his arm free and found that he couldn't. The small human's grip was like a mechanical vice, holding him in place with casual ease. "Let go of me, you primitive little." The sound that came next was unlike anything most beings had ever heard. It was the sharp, distinct crack of chitin and bone breaking under tremendous pressure. It was followed immediately by Vex-Nine's scream of agony, as Maya's grip tightened just enough to fracture his wrist. But that was just the beginning. With her other hand, Maya reached up and grasped the back of Vex-Nine's neck. The movement was almost gentle, like a parent positioning a child for a family photograph. Then, with a motion so quick that most observers couldn't follow it, she pulled down while simultaneously driving her knee upward. The impact point was precise. The third vertebra of Vex-Nine's spine, exactly where Krallick's physiology was most vulnerable. The sound of his backbone snapping was audible throughout the entire training bay, a wet, organic crack that seemed to echo for far longer than physics should have allowed. Commander Vex-Nine, veteran of 40 cycles of military service, conqueror of 3 star systems, and terror of countless recruits, collapsed to the floor like a broken puppet. His forearms splayed at unnatural angles, his reptilian features twisted in shock and pain, his powerful body reduced to a twitching, helpless mass. Maya looked down at him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Then she glanced up at the stunned faces surrounding her, as if suddenly remembering where she was. "Oh," she said conversationally. "I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but humans don't really respond well to being threatened by authority figures. It's kind of a species-wide quirk we have." Lieutenant Kral 7 was the first to find his voice. "Medical team to Training Bay 12. Commander down. Repeat, Commander down." As the medical personnel rushed in to attend to Vex-Nine's shattered form, Maya straightened her uniform and turned to address the other stunned instructors. "So," she asked with apparent sincerity, "should we continue with today's training schedule, or would you prefer to take a short break to process this?" The silence that followed was deafening. The medical bay of training facility Omega-7 had seen its share of injuries over the cycles. Broken bones from combat training, energy burns from weapons malfunctions, the occasional concussion from particularly enthusiastic sparring matches. But nothing quite like this. Commander Vex-9 lay motionless on the bioregeneration table, his spine held together by emergency medical scaffolding and enough pain suppressants to knock out a Stoneheart warrior. The lead medical officer, Dr. Yith Prime, kept shaking her elongated head as she reviewed the diagnostic readings. "Complete cervical fracture," she muttered to herself, her 6 eyes blinking in sequence as they processed the data. Precision damage to the exact pressure point that would cause maximum neural disruption with minimum fatality risk. Who did this? A trained Shadowblade assassin. Lieutenant Kral 7 shifted uncomfortably in the corner of the medical bay. "Actually, Doctor, it was one of the human recruits." All 6 of Dr. Yith Prime's eyes focused on him simultaneously. "Excuse me?" "Cadet Torres, the small female from the latest batch." Dr. Yith Prime's medical scanner clattered to the floor. "You're telling me that a human did this? A human who's been training for less than a month?" "That's correct, Doctor. And she knew exactly where to strike to cause this specific type of injury." Kral 7's mandibles clicked nervously. "It appeared to be instinctive, Doctor. She didn't hesitate, didn't calculate, just acted." Meanwhile, 3 levels down in Conference Room Alpha, Maya Torres sat across from a panel of coalition officials who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. The Emergency Review Board had been hastily assembled, consisting of representatives from 5 different species, all trying to figure out what to do with a human who had just hospitalized their commanding officer. Admiral Thex Omega, a towering Etherian whose translucent form shimmered with barely contained anxiety, spoke first. "Cadet Torres, do you understand the severity of your actions?" Maya nodded politely. "Yes, sir. I injured Commander Vex-9 during what he classified as a training exercise." "You nearly killed him," squeaked Colonel Fizz-12, a diminutive sparkwing whose feathers were practically standing on end with agitation. "Actually, Colonel, if I had wanted to kill him, he'd be dead." Maya's tone was matter-of-fact, which somehow made the statement even more chilling. "I applied just enough pressure to disable him without causing permanent neurological damage. He'll make a full recovery in about 6 weeks." The panel exchanged worried glances. General Corv 3, a massive ironhide whose species was renowned for their tactical expertise, leaned forward in his reinforced chair. "Torres, how did you know the exact anatomical vulnerability of a Kralix warrior?" Maya shrugged. "I didn't, sir. Not consciously, anyway. But when someone tries to hurt you, your body just reacts. It finds the weak spots automatically." "That's impossible," stated Dr. Research Leader Nim Nim, the panel's scientific advisor. "No species possesses instinctive knowledge of alien anatomy. It would require extensive study of—" "With respect, Doctor," Maya interrupted gently, "you might want to revise your assumptions about human capabilities. We're really not as simple as your files suggest." Admiral Thex Omega's form flickered with concern. "Torres, we need to understand what happened in that training bay. Commander Vex-9 claims he was conducting a standard combat assessment when you attacked him without provocation." Maya's green eyes hardened slightly. "Sir, Commander Vex-9 attempted to strike me across the face with enough force to cause serious injury. In human culture, that's called assault, and humans have very specific responses to assault." "But he's your commanding officer," Colonel Fizz-12 protested. "Surely your species understands military hierarchy." "Oh, we understand it perfectly, Colonel. But we also understand that no rank, no matter how high, gives someone the right to abuse those under their command." Maya's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath the words. "Respect is earned, not demanded. and Commander Vex-Nine lost any claim to respect the moment he decided to use his position to bully recruits. General Corv 3 studied Maya with calculating eyes. You speak of human responses as if they're universal among your species. Are you saying all humans would have reacted as you did? Maya considered the question carefully. Not exactly the same way, sir, but yes, any human faced with unprovoked violence from an authority figure would respond decisively. It's hardwired into us. We don't submit to bullies, regardless of their rank or species. The interrogation continued for 2 hours, with the panel growing increasingly uncomfortable as Maya answered their questions with calm precision. She showed no remorse for her actions, no fear of consequences, and no willingness to accept blame for what she clearly viewed as justified self-defense. Finally, Admiral Thex Omega dismissed her while the panel deliberated. As Maya left the conference room, she passed Lieutenant Krull 7 in the corridor. "Cadet," he called out, his voice uncertain. Maya turned. "Yes, Lieutenant." "The other human recruits, are they all like you?" Maya tilted her head thoughtfully. "What do you mean, sir?" "Capable of what you did to the commander." A small smile played at the corners of Maya's mouth. "Lieutenant, I'm probably the least dangerous human in our group. Most of my fellow recruits have military or combat sports backgrounds. I was just a pediatric nurse before I enlisted." Krull 7's mandibles went slack. A healer." "That's right, sir. I took care of sick children." Maya's smile widened slightly. "Turns out, spending years learning how to help tiny humans recover from injury teaches you an awful lot about anatomy and pressure points. Who knew?" She continued down the corridor, leaving Krull 7 standing frozen in place as the implications of her words sank in. Back in the conference room, the panel was in heated discussion. "We have to discharge them." Colonel Fizz 12 was practically bouncing in his chair. "All of them! They're too dangerous." "Based on what evidence?" Admiral Thex Omega countered. "One incident involving clear provocation from our own officer?" "She destroyed Commander Vex-Nine like he was made of paper." General Corv 3 rumbled thoughtfully. "The question isn't whether humans are dangerous, Colonel. Every warrior species is dangerous. The question is whether they can be trusted to direct that danger appropriately." Dr. Nim Nim was frantically scrolling through data on her tablet. "I've been reviewing the human recruitment files, and there are some interesting patterns. Their planet has an unusually high number of ongoing conflicts. Their entire history is essentially one continuous warfare cycle." "See?" Colonel Fizz 12 squeaked. "Violent savages." "Actually," Dr. Nim Nim continued, "that's not what the data suggests. Despite constant warfare, they've developed remarkably sophisticated rules of engagement, codes of honor, and protection protocols for non-combatants. Their violence is highly disciplined and purposeful." Admiral Thex Omega's form shimmered with consideration. "Go on." "They have concepts like war crimes and rules of war. They voluntarily limit their own effectiveness in combat to protect innocents. And according to these psychological profiles, they have an almost pathological hatred of those who abuse power or harm the defenseless." The pieces were starting to fall into place for General Corv 3. "So Commander Vex-Nine, by targeting and attempting to assault a recruit under his command, triggered every protective and defensive instinct their species has evolved over millennia of warfare," Dr. Nim Nim finished. "From Torres's perspective, she wasn't attacking a superior officer. She was stopping a predator." The panel fell silent as they absorbed this information. Finally, Admiral Thex Omega spoke. "Recommendations." General Corv 3 was the first to respond. "Complete psychological evaluation of Commander Vex-Nine. If he's been abusing his position, this incident may have saved us from a much larger problem down the line." "Agreed," said Dr. Nim Nim. "And I recommend accelerated xenobiology courses for all coalition officers. If we're going to work with humans, we need to understand their behavioral triggers." Colonel Fizz 12 looked around the room nervously. "And the human recruits?" Admiral Thex Omega's decision would reshape Coalition training protocols for generations to come. Continue their program, but with new instructors who understand that respect must be earned, not demanded. 3 days later, Maya stood in formation with her fellow recruits as their new commanding officer addressed them. Major Quinn Alpha, a respected Etherian veteran, had reviewed all the training footage and incident reports before accepting the assignment. "Recruits," Major Quinn Alpha began, her translucent form radiating calm authority. "I want to make something clear from the beginning. You are here because the Coalition values your unique capabilities. You will be challenged, pushed to your limits, and tested in ways that will forge you into the finest warriors in known space." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "But you will also be treated with the respect that all Coalition personnel deserve. Questions, concerns, and feedback are not just welcome, they're expected. We succeed through mutual respect and shared purpose, not fear and intimidation." Maya exchanged glances with Jake Morrison, a former Marine who'd been unusually quiet since the incident with Vex-Nine. He nodded slightly, his expression approving. "Now," Major Quinn Alpha continued, "I understand there was an unfortunate incident with your previous instructor. Let me be clear, Commander Vex-Nine's actions were completely contrary to Coalition values and protocols. His behavior was unacceptable, and his injuries were the direct result of his own poor judgment." She looked directly at Maya. "Cadet Torres, you acted within your rights to defend yourself against unprovoked assault. However, in future situations, I want you to come to me with concerns before they escalate to physical confrontation." "Yes, ma'am," Maya replied. "That said," Major Quinn Alpha's tone became slightly amused, "I'm told your restraint in dealing with the situation was actually quite remarkable. Commander Vex-Nine is expected to make a full recovery." Several of the human recruits began to smile. Sarah Kim, a former Olympic judoka, barely suppressed a chuckle. "Ma'am," called out Tony Vasquez, a former Army Ranger, "what happened to Commander Vex-Nine?" "He's been reassigned to administrative duties pending a full investigation into his training methods. I'm told he'll be spending considerable time reviewing Coalition protocols regarding appropriate conduct towards subordinates." The training that followed was unlike anything Maya had experienced. Major Quinn Alpha pushed them harder than Vex-Nine ever had. But there was a fundamental difference in approach. Where Vex-Nine had tried to break them, Quinn Alpha built them up. Where he had used humiliation as motivation, she used encouragement and constructive criticism. The results were remarkable. Within 2 weeks, the human recruits were outperforming expectations in every category. Their tactical thinking was creative and unpredictable. Their physical conditioning improved rapidly. And most importantly, they began to gel as a unit. "It's fascinating," Dr. Nim Nim observed to Major Quinn Alpha as they watched the humans run complex combat scenarios. Remove the hostility from their environment, and they become exponentially more effective. "Not just more effective," the Major replied. "More cooperative. They're not just performing as individuals anymore. They're functioning as a team." On the training floor, Maya was coordinating a multi-pronged assault on a fortified position with Jake Morrison calling artillery support, Sarah Kim handling close-quarters combat, and Tony Vasquez managing electronic warfare. Their movements were synchronized, their communication efficient, and their results devastating. "Time," called the exercise monitor. "Objective secured in 4 minutes, 37 seconds, new facility record." The humans high-fived each other, their celebration brief but enthusiastic. Major Quinn Alpha nodded approvingly. As the weeks passed, word of the human unit spread throughout the Coalition. Other training facilities requested copies of their performance data. Senior commanders began asking pointed questions about recruitment protocols for Earth. And in a small medical facility on the edge of Coalition space, Commander Vex-Nine completed his rehabilitation and faced a choice that would define the rest of his career. He could file a formal complaint against Maya Torres and demand her court-martial, or he could accept that he had learned something valuable about the true nature of strength. He chose wisely. 6 months later, Maya Torres graduated from Coalition training with the highest scores in facility history. She was immediately assigned to an elite strike team tasked with handling the Coalition's most sensitive missions. But before she left training facility Omega-7, she received an unexpected visitor. Commander Vex-Nine, walking with only a slight limp, appeared at her quarters. "Torres," he said simply. "Commander," she replied, offering a respectful nod. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior during training. And to thank you." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Thank me, sir? For showing me what real strength looks like. For teaching me that earning respect is more important than demanding it." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "And for not killing me when you easily could have." Maya smiled. "You're welcome, sir. We all make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them." As Vex-Nine walked away, Maya couldn't help but feel that humanity's integration into the galactic community was off to a promising start. After all, if they could turn a bully like Vex-Nine into someone capable of growth and self-reflection, imagine what they could accomplish with allies who were already inclined to work together. The galaxy, she reflected, was about to become a much more interesting place. And somewhere in the Coalition's Central Command, Admiral Thex Omega was reviewing humanity's first official performance reports and coming to a startling conclusion.